My name is Emily, and for the first 3 years of my marriage, I believed patience could solve almost anything. I believed love meant compromise. I believed if I kept choosing peace, eventually everyone else would too. I was wrong. My husband, Ryan, and I lived in a small suburban home outside Charlotte, North Carolina. It wasn't luxurious, but it was ours. At least, that's what I thought. Ryan's mother, Linda, lived only 15 minutes away. She never called before coming over. At first, she would stop by with homemade casseroles or flowers for the porch. I appreciated the gesture. She smiled often and always said, "I'm just helping." Then little things started changing. One afternoon, I came home from work and found my kitchen completely rearranged. Every cabinet had been organized differently. My coffee mugs were gone from the shelf where I'd always kept them. Linda laughed when she saw my face. "I fixed it," she said. "You'll thank me later." Ryan shrugged. "Mom's just trying to help." I let it go. A few weeks later, she replaced the curtains in our living room because she said mine looked too gloomy. Ryan thanked her. I smiled politely. Inside, something felt unsettled. Months passed. She began opening our mail if it was left on the counter. She folded my laundry. She watered my plants without asking. She even started leaving groceries in our refrigerator and throwing away food she didn't approve of. Every time I mentioned it, Ryan gave the same answer. That's just how she is. One evening, I finally asked him, "Don't you think our home should have some boundaries?" He looked genuinely confused. "Boundaries? She's my mom." "I know she's your mom," I said calmly, "but this is our home." He kissed my forehead. "You're overthinking it." Those words stayed with me longer than either of us realized. I stopped bringing it up. Not because I agreed, because I was tired of explaining why privacy mattered. Then came Saturday morning. I had volunteered at a community fundraiser and came home earlier than expected. The front door was unlocked. Music played softly upstairs. I called Ryan's name. No answer. When I walked into our bedroom, I froze. My closet doors were wide open. Half my clothes were lying on the bed. Linda stood there, holding one of my dresses. She smiled as if nothing was unusual. "Oh, good," she said. "You're home." I couldn't even speak. She continued folding sweaters into boxes. "I've been meaning to help you simplify." I finally managed to ask, "What are you doing?" She laughed. "Honey, you have too many things. Ryan said you've been wanting to organize." I looked around. Shoes, winter coats, boxes, jewelry, family photo albums. Everything had been touched. My chest tightened. I never asked anyone to organize my closet. "Oh," she replied casually. Ryan gave me the spare key. He said I could come whenever I wanted. Those words landed harder than anything else. Ryan had given her a key. Without telling me. Without asking me. Without even mentioning it. Just then, Ryan walked into the room carrying coffee. He looked surprised to see me. "You're home early." I stared at him. "You gave your mother a key?" He looked uncomfortable. "It's not a big deal." Linda interrupted. "I told him married couples shouldn't keep secrets." I looked at Ryan. "You didn't think I deserved to know?" He sighed. "Emily, it's just Mom." I looked around our bedroom again. Nothing felt familiar anymore. Not because things had been moved, because suddenly I understood something. I didn't feel like a wife in my own home. I felt like a guest. I quietly picked up the spare house key sitting on the dresser. I placed it in my purse. No yelling, no accusations, no tears. I simply said, "I'm going for a drive." Ryan called after me. "Can we talk about this tonight?" I nodded. "We will." I drove to a nearby park and sat in my car for almost an hour. Not crying. Just thinking. For 3 years, I had kept asking Linda to change. I had kept hoping Ryan would notice. Maybe I had been asking the wrong person all along. That evening, after everyone had left, I walked back into the house. Ryan was waiting in the kitchen. "I think you're making this bigger than it is," he said gently. I looked at him and realized this conversation wasn't about his mother anymore. It was about our marriage. I reached into my purse and slowly placed something on the kitchen counter. Ryan's expression changed the moment he saw it. It was the spare house key, the one Linda had been using whenever she pleased. Ryan looked at it, then at me. "You took it?" I did. He frowned. "You should have talked to me first." I almost smiled. "That's exactly what I've been asking you to do for 3 years. Silence filled the room. Not angry silence, the kind that forces people to hear what they've avoided. I took a slow breath. "I'm not asking you to choose between me and your mother." He looked relieved for a second. Then I continued. "I'm asking you to choose whether our marriage has boundaries." He didn't answer immediately. Instead, he sat down at the kitchen table. "I honestly didn't think it was hurting anyone." "I know," I replied. "And that's the problem." I explained everything I had kept inside, how every surprise visit made me anxious, how every rearranged room made the house feel less like mine, how every decision made without me reminded me that my opinions came last. "I wasn't competing with your mom," I said softly. "I was competing with the idea that our marriage didn't deserve privacy." Ryan rubbed his forehead. "I never looked at it that way. I know." The next morning, I made breakfast like any other Sunday. No cold shoulder, no dramatic speeches, just quiet consistency. Later that afternoon, Linda arrived. She unlocked the front door. Or at least she tried. The key no longer worked. Ryan had changed the locks that morning. She knocked instead. When he opened the door, she immediately asked, "Why doesn't my key work?" Ryan stepped outside and gently closed the door behind him. I watched through the window, but couldn't hear their conversation. They spoke for nearly 20 minutes. Linda gestured with her hands. Ryan remained calm. Eventually, he came back inside alone. "Mom's upset," he admitted. "I expected that. I told her she has to call before visiting." I nodded. And she won't have a house key anymore." I didn't celebrate. This wasn't about winning. It was about finally being heard. The following weeks weren't perfect. Linda tested the new boundaries. She called unexpectedly. She hinted that I'd changed Ryan. She even mailed me an article about respecting elders. Instead of defending myself, I simply stayed consistent. "If you'd like to visit, we'd love to schedule a time." Nothing more, nothing less. Gradually, something surprising happened. Ryan started noticing things on his own. When Linda criticized my cooking during Thanksgiving, he calmly said, "Mom, Emily worked hard on dinner." When she suggested reorganizing our living room again, he answered, "We're happy with it." He wasn't rude, he was respectful, just as respectful toward our marriage as he was toward his mother. Months later, Linda came over for dinner. She rang the bell. She waited to be invited inside. As she entered, she smiled awkwardly. I brought dessert. I smiled back. "Thank you." After dinner, she asked, "Would you mind if I helped with the dishes?" For the first time, it was a question, not an assumption. I handed her a towel. "I'd appreciate that." We worked side by side in comfortable silence. Our relationship wasn't perfect. It probably never would be, but respect had finally entered the room. And respect changes everything. Looking back, I realized something important. The problem had never been a house key. It had been access. Access to decisions, access to privacy, access to a marriage that should have belonged to two people. I couldn't control my mother-in-law. I couldn't change years of family habits, but I could decide what I would accept inside my own home. Sometimes the calmest comeback isn't proving someone wrong. It's quietly protecting what matters most. And when the people who love you finally understand your boundaries, your home becomes peaceful again, not because everyone agrees, but because everyone knows where respect begins. If this story touched you, please comment and subscribe. I have one question for you. Have you ever had to set a difficult boundary with someone you love? Let me know your answer below.